Hi everybody, welcome to Learning to Float. This is a course in how to press into handstand and basically hold handstand. Mickey here will be assisting me in this course. It's essentially for anyone and everyone who is ready to try it. Now, when I say ready, I mean, as far as prerequisites go, you're going to want to have a decent forward fold. I would say at least 75% flat back. Because if your hamstrings aren't open, that'll get in the way of you being able to float up. And then also you want to have a good steady, upper body strength for holding, right? So you want to be comfortable in your downward dog, being able to just hold it and hang out there. If downward dog is still challenging for you, handstand is definitely not something that you want to try at this point. You want to be comfortable upside down. So any version of headstand, Shirsasana, you want to have a good relationship to that asana as well. And, maybe doing some straight arm bakasana, that'll really test the limits of your ability to push through your hands and lift. So if you feel comfortable with those elements, then you're ready to play around with pressing into a handstand, and this course is for you. If not, you might want to, integrate some more of that foundational stuff before you, go upside down. So hopefully you guys enjoy this course and you get something out of it. All right, everybody, so we're gonna go over some of the components that need to be in line, those prerequisites I was mentioning, so that way when you go to put it together, you've got your ducks in a row. And the first thing that I want to cover is, your forward fold, whether it's a seated forward fold or a standing forward fold. There's a tipping point, a degree at which you kind of have to rely on an excessive amount of length in the back body. And so if your forward folds are short, your presses will probably not find that lift, okay? So Mickey's gonna demonstrate more or less, you don't have to have a perfect forward fold, but the degree to which you kind of want to gain, right? So he's just going to fold forward, right? Now obviously he can go really deep, right? And that would be like a really nice degree at which you would want to be able to bend. But it's not totally required to go that deep. If he comes up maybe about 20%, right? So like even there, he's able to lift his chest, lengthen his torso, and keep the back leg straight. And this is more or less the position that you're going to be in when you go to press. Okay, so he'll demonstrate what that looks like. Also standing up, standing forward fold. Right, so a lot of length here. And then if he were to, maybe not have as much length like some of you, right? If you can see, put your hands down, Mickey, put them flat. Now come up, lean forward. No, keep the hands flat. Just lean your hips forward. So the legs have to be able to stay straight as you tip forward and push into the hands. So having this length here without it being caught and bending into the legs, right? Because the second that you bend into the legs, it becomes much harder. So if you're not totally lengthened out in the back here, it's going to be a much harder press. Impossible? Probably not impossible, but you're going to work against yourself, and we don't want to be working against the body. We want to work with the body, okay? So the other thing that we want to have comfortable is a good downward facing dog position. So go ahead and just demonstrate downward dog. Maybe you're not even a yogi, but if you wanted to learn how to do this maneuver, you want to be comfortable in downward dog, okay? Because this is where you learn how to really hold your weight upside down, especially with the arms straight, okay? So if downward dog is exhausting for you, you might want to build up some strength here, okay? 5 breaths, 10 breaths, whatever. And then get comfortable, find a space of ease in your downward dog position, okay? And then the next pose he's going to demonstrate, and this is probably the most advanced of the prerequisites, would be a good straight arm bakasana. Now bakasana can be done with bent arms, but if you go for the straight arm version of it, which in some languages would be crane, right? Lots of pushing through the ground, being able to really, really engage those arms, and find that opposition to lift and lengthen, okay? So you can start here to learn how to manage your weight on your hands. It's a great place to actually learn that piece. And then last but not least, if you've never been upside down, you might be uncomfortable upside down. So you're going to want to have a good Shirsasana or headstand. Now you can do Shirsasana with the hands on the head, or you can do your tripod stance. Tripod might actually be better in this scenario because, again, we're working on our hands. So go ahead and just demonstrate the tripod headstand position. Yeah, so it's really important that you're comfortable inverted. If you're not comfortable inverted, then your fear and your mind's going to psych you out when you try to go upside down, and we don't want that to be in the way. Fear is a big part of handstands, and I'll talk about that at the very end of this course, and some of the things to expect psychologically. But the body's not used to being upside down. Go ahead and come down, Mickey. The body's not used to being upside down, and so you don't want to jump into something totally advanced, right? You want to work in baby steps. So if you're not comfortable upside down, definitely familiarize yourself with that. Make friends with the inversions and get comfortable there. So that way when you go to press, it's just another step in the inversion process, okay? All right, everybody, now we're going to actually go through some of the intermediate steps, I guess, to finding what you need to press into a handstand. Mickey's going to demonstrate actually from Shirsasana or headstand how to find some of those mechanics. This way you're stable, close to the ground, and you don't have to worry about balance, right? You can just focus on shifting your weight and finding that lift, right? So he's going to demonstrate a few things that he did as a beginner to move into this process. So go ahead. So with the more comfortable base, it's easier to explore some of the upside down movements, right? So here he's just kind of shifting the weight, shifting his hips back, putting everything, into that base. So when he goes to lift his legs, he's already got that stability, right? So you can start with one leg at a time, practice lifting both. So you get a feel for that weight distribution and how it's different upside down, right? And then just practice here. Get a feel for the weight distribution, the base. Get a feel for lifting your core, 1 foot at a time, both feet. And play with this as much as you want, because eventually we're going to do it all from a handstand position. You can go ahead and come down, Mickey. And if you want to describe some of the reasons behind it that you think are important.
Yeah, well, I think working with one leg at a time really gives you a feel for taking the weight forward without losing the balance, because you have the head, the arms, and also 1 foot still on the floor. And the action of lifting that one leg and pulling the heel towards your butt is very strengthening for the back body. It gets you into the hamstrings, it gets you into the buttocks, it gets you into the back muscles. When you're lifting with both knees bent, holding that kind of half headstand shape, the center of gravity is different than when your legs are straight, and I find it almost a little more strengthening. That I spent a lot of time kind of holding that halfway shape and feeling like physically it was a little more strenuous, but once the strength foundation was made, then the balance became easy. And it was not this wobbly pose with the legs straight, because the arms, the shoulders had learned to root. if that
Right.
makes sense.
All right, everybody, we're going to take what we did on our head and apply it to our hands. And before we go to the middle of the room, we're going to do something at the wall, right? We have a bolster at the wall, and we have the wall. Bolster is going to help cushion the head, and the wall is going to protect us from going over, okay? When you go to press into a handstand, you have to move out of your comfort zone, okay? Everyone thinks that it's going up, but actually you're going forward, all right? So you want to practice that shifting of the weight forward without feeling like you're going to fall over. Okay, the wall is really great for that. Obviously the bolster is too, because now we don't have to worry about hurting our head. And Mickey's going to demonstrate what that looks like. Go ahead. But before you go all the way into it, put your hands down. Now if you can tell, Mickey's really long, okay? So his hips come up really high in proportion to where his shoulders and his arms are, right? Some people might have longer, like when I do this position, my hips are actually not as high up, you know, because of my length of torso and arms. Okay, he's got longer limbs, so it's much easier for him to shift that weight over his head because it's kind of already there. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the rest of this course. But for right now, I just want to point out that like the hips are high, right? And that's going to help him. But if you don't have that naturally, we can help you too, okay? But go ahead and just demonstrate what that looks like. Okay, so he's going to apply all the same things he did last time with the 1 foot at a time, right? And both feet. Good. Yeah, and the bolster's there to give him cushion, right? You can push into it and find that sweet spot. And the wall is there as well, so that way he's not going to go over anywhere. So once you get comfortable in a headstand position, this would be your next step, right? You want to get comfortable with the wall on your hands, doing the exact same thing, okay? And, you know, be patient with yourself, because going upside down is not comfortable in the beginning, especially when you have to, you know, leverage your weight, move out of your comfort zone. Now you have the balancing aspect of it, which we really don't have on our head, all right, which is why we do it on our head first. So it's that tipping forward, right, and into the pillow and using the wall to kind of give us that cushion as we find our sweet spot and learn to lift our legs up off the floor, okay? Next, I'm going to show you another variation of what a lot of students do. Obviously, like this course is designed to help you press straight from a piped position, okay? Not everyone can do that right off the gate, so we do the straddle press, okay? This is good for those who actually don't have the long limbs and they can't get their hips up higher, because now, right, like I don't have to go as far. I'm kind of already in this position. I don't have to lift my hips as high. It's just a different, you know, variation depending on your anatomy. And it's easier from here for some people to find that. So that'll be the next thing that we cover if you want to try that variation. Now we're going to start to put some of it together. We showed you the straddle, we showed you the toe tap, we showed you how to practice at the wall. Now Mickey's going to demonstrate another little tool that you can throw into your box, which is just a gentle hop, right? So before he goes one leg at a time and tries to lift up in the middle of the floor, he's going to show you what that little hop looks like that you can integrate to kind of help find the balance as well into your hands. So nothing crazy aggressive, just enough to feel that like, oh, my weight's forward now and I need to balance it. And this is what it feels like. He's pushing find yourself losing balance, it's a great way to go, oh, you know, I need to get stable again, right? So now he's going to actually do what he did at the wall, right? He's going to lean into it and do one foot at a time and then both. Pushing through the ground and you're lifted, okay? The legs can throw you too far over if you're not quite balanced enough. All you really need to find your center of gravity is your hips over your head, okay? So the next thing that I want to have him demonstrate actually is Bakasana, because a lot of times it's hard to find what you need in the more challenging poses, right? So we're going to take a step back and we're going to go to a more basic pose, right? Something that you should be able to do pretty easily. And we're going to refine some of those mechanics. All right, so you can do it from a bent arm position and work towards straight arms. And the nice thing about this is if you do Bakasana, especially with the legs around the arms as opposed to on top, then it promotes this hugging in feeling, okay? And when you're trying to scoop that energy up and pike yourself off the ground, there's a hugging in that happens, right? Only it's like magnified. So it's a nice place to start in Bakasana because you're low to the ground, right? We're not going all the way up. We're just trying to find that pushing down and pulling in and up sensation. And the knees and the legs, right? The inner thighs really help to draw that energy in. And you can get a good feel for that. So Mickey's going to demonstrate that action. All right, so the next activity that you can play with, if you'd like, is actually Bakasana to handstand, okay? This requires much more oomph, okay? So we're actually going to make it harder before we make it easier. So when we go to actually do the move, it's lighter, right? So one of the ways that I was kind of taught in my younger years, you know, go hard and then back off, and it's a little bit more simple. So Bakasana handstand is not an easy move, all right? So don't think that like this is like, you know, some sort of preliminary thing. This is if you really want to challenge yourself so that when you go to press to handstand, you feel that lightness more organically, right? So you can do this at the wall with the bolster or a pillow and lean into it, right? The same kind of thing that you would do if you were trying to do the other baby moves, right? Or you can just do it right in the middle of the floor. Now, some people, they'll be in Bakasana and they'll go to lift and they ain't got nothing, okay? Totally standard, totally normal. Keep trying, keep finding that push-pull, right? So you can lift your hips up. And again, you know, the whole mechanical part is really in, you know, the hands here all the way to the hips. The legs are pretty much ornamental once you get everything else in line. So Mickey's going to demonstrate this move. It's a tough one. So you just come into your Bakasana, and then you push to the ground. And as you can see, he's taking his hips over his head, right? So you get that feeling. Yeah, and you can practice that. Maybe you don't go very far. Maybe you just push the knees off the triceps, right? But Keep trying, keep squeezing, push down, hug in, hug up, and try to shoot for those hips over your head. All right? So that's another activity that you can play with. And then from the actual pike press position, there's a couple of things I want to talk about before he lifts up into the final integration. So go ahead and just stand in Uttanasana. Now, yeah, so in this position, right, like when Mickey does it, his hands are more forward. No, more forward. Yeah, so most people, they're going to have a gap here, okay? That's pretty standard and pretty normal, and that's perfectly acceptable too. Sometimes you'll see people who actually press from this position, but it's much more challenging. So take your hands back, Mickey. Yeah. So that really requires lengthening, moving completely out of your comfort zone to get the hips up, right? Because now we're totally vertical. And that might be an ultimate goal for you, but most people are going to do this press with their hands slightly forward. Okay? Now, another thing that's super important to mention, if Mickey drops his head, now his eyes are going backwards and the energy's moving down, okay? So I always have students take their chin and their gaze forward, all right? And the more forward you can go, the better, because now we have a slight back bend here. So when we go to take the hips up, it kind of helps to stop the tipping over, right? Because that's what a lot of people are afraid of, is like, I'm going to go forward, but where is too much? Right? So you want to actually use the head as like a barrier to stop so much momentum, right? We have this nice little curve here. And it's all about just applying the energetics, you know? Just like in back bends, you know, if we start the back bend right at the base of the skull, it carries all the way to the sacrum. And it's the same thing here. So if we start the action right here, it carries all the way to the hips, okay? So you don't have to overthink the lower body. You just have to trust that if your gaze and your chin are moving forward, that the body will follow. And if you look down, right, all of a sudden energy goes down. So maintain that lift by keeping the chin and the gaze up. Gazing forward, even over gazing down, right? So if you can maybe gaze a foot or two beyond where your hands are, that'll help you. As you push into this position, though, you're not going to move just over the hands. You're going to actually move slightly out of that vertical line and then kind of veer backwards. Okay, so be prepared. A lot of times students, when they do this, what happens is they're like, you know, oh, I feel like I'm falling forward. I feel like I'm falling forward. You are falling forward, and you need to get comfortable with that forward movement, okay? And trust that the position of the spine will help to balance you out when the hips come off the ground. Because a lot of times students, they'll find a lift, and then they psych out, and they come back down. Keep riding that wave, okay? Now, last but not least, one of the things that helps, especially if your limbs don't feel like they're in proportion to the length that you need, you can come up onto the ball of the foot or the tippy toes. Now our hips are much higher. We don't have to work as hard to lift them. They're already kind of up in that position, so that all we have to do is tip forward, push, trust that gravity's got us, and we come off the floor, okay? No problem. Mickey's very bendy, so he has to work extra hard to not bend when he's in his handstand to control the mobility, and that we'll go over when we talk about handstand. Stiffer people can hold it better than bendy people. Bendy people have to control the waves more. Okay, but last but not least, come back to Uttanasana. So the last and final component with this, okay, if we're going to work energetically, okay, you've tried everything else, you're good at the wall, you're good playing with the other exercises, right? Our chin is forward, we're leaning forward, we're pushing through our hands. Now this is super important. When you go to kind of find that lift, right? The legs. Now, they're ornamental, but they do play a role, and it's a simple role. You just want to keep the energy moving in. Just keep it moving in. When I taught myself this, I just pictured a blue line of energy from my chin all the way down to the inner part of my feet. And it just reminded me to draw energy in, okay? So, and it also helped me, I think, just kind of lift, right? Like I knew what my body needed to do. I just needed to follow that midline and move accordingly. So don't let your feet flay out. Keep turning it in. Everything is going to move in, okay? And then what happens is you end up containing that energy, and then it just lifts you off the ground, okay? You don't have to jump at that point or kick at that point or, you know, add to it. You just have to allow it to move with the rest of the action, because again, we're connected. Our legs are going to move. If you press forward and into this handstand, you're not going to leave your legs behind. They're connected to your hips, they're connected to your heart, right? So they'll follow suit. The only thing you have to remember is to draw energy in towards the midline and let them, you know, come off the ground. So you don't have to go all the way at Mickey, but if you want to just demonstrate pushing, see he goes forward, he tips, his hips are up, right? Yeah, good. And it's a light movement, right? We're working with opposition. We're pulling the energy in and up, and it's pulling us into position, okay, without muscling into that position, all right? So the last thing we'll talk about is just holding that handstand. Sometimes people are uncomfortable actually doing this motion because they don't even know how to hold a handstand. So when they get there, they tend to psych themselves out and fall. So that was the last thing that we talk about, is just how to get comfortable in handstand and find the physics there. Okay, everybody, so the last step in pressing to a handstand is the first step in doing a handstand. You have to be able to just hold it, right? So although this course is more about the actual press, we are going to go over some of the mechanics that are involved in holding a handstand, because if you can't hold it, then that last piece, you know, won't be integrated into the movement. So a lot of things can happen when you go into a handstand, you know what I mean? It's a little uncomfortable for the brain to be upside down and then to have to stabilize and balance, right? So that's why we work with the wall. It's our friend. It helps us find those mechanics without falling over. A couple of points that I'd like to make, though, about different types of handstands. You know, I was taught many different forms, and none are really right, none are really wrong. It just depends on your body type, right? Like I've learned the acrobatic gymnastics kind, where you kind of sink into the shoulders, right? So you're in the joint. You know, the more yogic form would be to lengthen from the joint, so you actually find space in the shoulder girdle, moving upward, okay? But it's really just a matter of you finding that stability, and then once you're comfortable, you can work from that point. Now, if we're going to, you know, look at the physics of it, then we have to start with what our base is. What is our root? Well, in this case, our roots are our hands, you know? So we have to find that opposition, that leverage, that push-pull, right? So we push into the ground just like we would, you know, in the press itself, but we want to stabilize that. We don't want to get spaghetti arms, okay? So we push through the hands, and then from there we maintain that coiling inward and that pulling in, that drawing in sensation, okay? To be straight up and down requires a lot of stabilization in the stabilizing muscles, okay? Some of the tricks, though, that can help this process. Number one, you want to keep your chin and your gaze forward and down, not straight down. If you're straight down, you're working with a much harder vertical line, okay? If you can adjust that balance and shift that weight to where now the head is kind of countering some of that body weight, right? Like if your hips are here and your head's kind of here, then it helps to distribute that weight, and now we have better balance, okay? You want to do that. And then the fingertips, right? So a lot of times people kind of miss this point. The fingertips, as you're swaying backward and forward, your fingertips become kind of the brakes and the gas. A little forward, a little backwards, okay? I don't really recommend the banana butt, okay? Only because it will actually, you know, pull into your low back, okay? I recommend more pulling in through the pelvic area, okay, and drawing your legs inward and up. When you take your feet up, okay, a pointed toe, this is really important, a pointed toe tends to move you into a back bend. A flexed foot tends to pull you out. So I know sometimes they talk about like Barbie feet in yoga. That's kind of what you want. You want that flointed position where the foot is not flexed nor pointed. It's both, right? So the foot itself is at a point position, but the toes are flexed back. This, again, if your fingers are the bottom brakes and gas, then at the top end of your handstand, the toes kind of do the same thing, okay? They act as that balancer up top, okay? So these are some of the mechanics that are involved. You want to make sure you draw in through the legs, not out. If the legs are swaying outward, it's going to be really hard to contain that energy and keep it in. Think about pushing down, pulling up. Ball of the foot. Send that ball of the foot to the ceiling, okay? And go up. If you think you're losing balance, pull in, go up. Pull in, go up. Over time, you'll train the muscles, right? And you'll be able to hold that handstand. In the beginning, though, it's super, super, super important, unless you're, you know, totally not afraid to fall, you know, that you use the wall. The wall's your friend. So use it to find that stability. Now, some people crawl up face first. Personally, not a fan of that. I know that's like an old gymnastics technique to get the frontal hip points on the wall. If you want to try that, you can. You know, if you're not really stable and you go backwards, you have nothing to counter it, okay? So you can try that. I personally prefer that your butt is facing the wall instead. So, and then you can work that motion with the legs. So I'm going to actually physically get to the wall, and I'm going to play with these mechanics so you can see them in action, okay? Okay, so now we're going to take all of those mechanics that I just broke down, and we're going to apply them at the wall. Again, the wall is a good place to start. You don't want to be too dependent on it, but it tends to help you move through some of the fear factors. And it helps you to just find those pieces without having to struggle with the balance. So starting with the hands, now depending on your body type, will vary for how far away from the wall you are. If you're too far away from the wall, you're gonna arch your back too much. We don't want that. We don't want to have that banana back going on. But if we're too close, then our hips tend to push us off, and we can't find the balance either. So we want to be somewhere in between. Kicking, piking, whatever, it's kind of your choice when you come up. But your hands, you want them to basically be shoulder width apart, okay? If they're too narrow, it's a struggle. If they're too wide, it's a struggle. So you want to find your shoulder width and place them there, okay? Push through the palms of your hands, find your fingertips, and then roll your arms in, okay? So we have this inner action happening. I'm exaggerating, but everything is going to move in, okay? And then we're going to kick up. All right. So from here, first thing you want to do is push through your hands, try to tighten your body, pull everything in, and just shoot it up. Now, if I were to do a handstand the way that the gymnasts do it, it's a lot more in the shoulders, okay? They find stability there. The yoga way is to find length. Either way is fine. So we're here, we're going to pull it in, all right? And then we're going to try and move the pelvis in. If the butt's doing this, it's going to be a struggle. We want to pull it in, okay? So again, you want to find a comfortable position to where you're not too far from the wall, not too close to the wall. You can easily have a banana back if you're not careful, right? 1 foot at a time, you want to bring it away from the wall, get used to the balance, get used to the weight distribution, right? Super important, push away with your hands. Gaze comes forward, and then you can bring both feet out and practice the balance as well. The body's going to want a banana. You're going to want to try and keep it tight, keep that pelvis locked in. And just keep playing with this motion until it feels comfortable. So the other things I want to mention is make sure you keep your feet in. If your feet are turned out, it makes it much more difficult to hold the balance. So keep your feet in. Again, 1 foot at a time, away from the wall. Use those feet. Ball of the foot to the ceiling, floint. So point the foot, flex the toe back. And just keep playing with this motion until it feels solid. The other thing that you can do to actually get more shoulder stability is to take your feet to like a piked position at the wall. Just walk your feet up and then put the weight over your shoulders, push through your hands, and just find the back strength. There's a certain degree of erector spinae strength that you definitely want to make sure you have as you push down and pull in and up. So you can take one leg away and just feel the power of what it requires to hold your body weight upside down. Practice until you feel comfortable. And then you can integrate it all in the end.
So I wanted to include some side notes in this course. Handstand is a very advanced move, whether you're a yogi or not. Like, it's just an advanced physical move to do. So keep that in mind when you're trying to attempt this or learn this, because you know, even a lot of seasoned practitioners kind of struggle with handstand and can't press, okay? So be patient with yourself. A lot of weight goes into the arms and the hands when you're holding this position, so it does require a tremendous amount of strength. Be patient in that process of building it up, so that way you don't wear out your joints, you don't collapse into your frame. You want to make sure that you are doing this in a very healthy manner, right? I also want to point out that, like, psychologically, there's a lot of fear involved with this pose. Being upside down is not normal for most of us, okay? Unless you've had a lot of training and movements that requires you to be inverted, this is not normal for you, okay? And so that's why I really like the wall, like just being at the wall until you feel comfortable upside down. Shirsasana, headstand, another great position to practice all of these movements from, because you're much more stable in that inverted process. You got a lot of blood going to the head, okay? And then also just knowing that, like, if you fall out of it, you want to understand how to break that fall. If you can tuck your head in the process of following or fall into a back bend, you're going to be much better off. But the fear part definitely seems to get into a lot of people's way because they're afraid they're going to go over and the next thing they know they're done, okay? Typically that's not the case though. Like, if you fall and you're safe, you're fine. No one tends to break bones when they fall out of this. It's much more of the mind trying to play tricks on you than it really is even the reality of what would happen if you fell, okay? So if you can bear that in mind, tuck your head if you think you're gonna go over. You'll protect your neck and your shoulders, okay? And then also, I think it's important to note that when you're pushing, when you're pressing, like when you're in the middle of the room and you're going to go for that press, there's a point at which, and I mentioned this before, you actually feel like you're moving out of your comfort zone. You feel like, I am going too far forward, okay? Good, that's the direction you want to be in. Okay, you want to be able to yield forward and find that tipping point so the hips and the feet can come off the floor. And you do, you move outside of your safety zone for a split second, and then you shift back. Okay, so don't let that point, that tipping point, stop you, because that's where you need to be. Okay, so if you feel uncomfortable, you're in the right space, right? We don't want our fear to manage us or cripple us. We want just enough of like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but I'm going to keep breathing and moving through it, right? I'm going to move into that point where I feel like I'm not going to be able to be in control just long enough to get my feet and hips off the ground. And I'm going to, move into this maneuver, okay? The legs, as long as they're active, right? No kicking, no compensating. They're just active, they're engaged. As long as the legs are engaged, the legs will lift up very easily on their own, okay? You don't have to activate that. You just have to worry about your foundation, your roots, where you're going, your gaze, and allow the weight to just tip on its own, okay? And as long as you do this, you will find that sweet spot. We went over how important it is to have enough flexibility, so you do want to be flexible enough so there's no catches in this process, and you want to be strong enough to just hold it. But really and truly, if those two components are in line, you're really just working with fear and psyching yourself out or into it, okay? So this is a big mind pose, and again, as long as the physical, I'm strong, I can hold it against the wall, and I'm flexible, I can do a forward fold, as long as those components are there, you really are good to go. I've seen people who really weren't very advanced practitioners that actually could master this, and that became something they were very good at. You don't have to do it from a piked position to start. You can straddle it out. It's a different maneuver, right? It kind of takes some of the length that you need out of it. It just makes it a little bit easier from that perspective, but it's all just physics. We're just tipping and leaning and moving into it. So I wish you guys the best of luck. It's a little bit more of a challenge for me to teach this only because I didn't personally struggle with it. But I'm always available for privates. If you're struggling, if I can look at your body, it's easier for me to see where the hiccups are, but I'm happy to work with you one-on-one if you are still struggling with this handstand press. Nothing's impossible. You just gotta keep hammering away at it and it'll happen, all right? So have a good one, guys. Namaste.